Welcome to today's video. If you've been here before, you'll know of course that I'm Gillerboy Jr. And if you're new here, well, firstly, that's excellent. Thank you for clicking my video. Thank you for choosing me. Secondly, welcome to the channel. I see you're somewhat a man or woman of culture yourself, and I talk mostly about creepy and unsettling aspects in gaming, whether that's the characters, locations, or just certain ideas that cross my mind, and then I try my best to put them into somewhat of an enjoyable video format for everybody to enjoy. Just like today's video, so please, enjoy your watch. Games are a really good way at making people feel, making a person feel. Well, feel what exactly? Well, whatever the developers intend. Usually from overwhelming sadness to an adrenaline pumping fight sequence, games tend to put you into their environments. So why should fear be any different? Why can a game unintentionally make you afraid? Try and go back and play some of the older games available to you. The simplicity and endless gameplay loop creates this void of nothing except simple sounds and blurred images with little movements or engagement, which makes you feel unsettled. But is it actually scary, or is it just old? Well, funnily enough, that's the topic of today's video. Maybe the progression of technology is what creates this feeling of unease when playing these older games, as we're used to much more open and complex landscapes in today's video games. There is always something happening on screen today. Colours to overwhelm your eyes, sounds to fill your ears. So why, when we step into the opposite direction of time, do we get this fuzzy and unsettling feeling when it comes to some of the older games? Well, firstly, if you're a fan of creepy gaming and creepypastas in general, you'll be familiar with Bend Round or Godzilla NES. These are just two of the most popular gaming related creepypastas, but with a lot of games during the early 2010s came a dozen or more creepypasta associated. But what do a lot of these games have in common? Well, they're old. The idea of a haunted cartridge or glitched asset in a game coming to life or making the game entirely different with today's games is, well, hard to believe. And if someone sat you down telling you that a new Call of Duty game shot out of their console, summoned Cthulhu and cut their neck, you'd probably laugh. A lot. But with older games, there's just something a bit more charming and engaging when the idea of a haunted game comes along. For some reason, it seems a bit more plausible than a copy of Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask could make a spirit come out of the console than a copy of Skate 3 on the 360. And I think that's because of a term now coined as analog horror. I just want to quickly note that I'd like to make a video of analog horror in itself in the future, so I'm not going to go too in depth with the topic, but just enough to hopefully whet your appetite and have you come back for the other video. So, let me give you the literal definition of analog horror. Analog horror is commonly characterised by low fidelity graphic, cryptic messages and visual style reminiscent of the late 20th century television and analog recordings. This is done to match the setting, as analog horror works typically set somewhere between 1960 and 1990. The name analog horror comes from the genre's aesthetic incorporation of elements related to the analog electronics, such as analog television, VHS, with the latter being the analog method of recording, video and audio. So, when we look at analog horror when it comes to our question today, we can see that over the last 15 to 20 years we've been slowly paving the way for a potential crossover of age and horror. The old is becoming the new scary by using old graphics, minimal development and blurry visuals to create a new, old brand of horror in our video games. But again, what about the games that aren't supposed to be scary? Let's take Pong for example. The minimal visuals and little to no sound other than the ball being pinged from each side of the screen creates exactly what it is. Little to nothing. So when you're playing or watching gameplay from Pong, you'll be surprised to feel little to nothing, just like the game. It wasn't intended to have you sat binging 15-hour sessions with your friends over a headset. You're looking at the embryo of gaming, the beginning of what today's games have become. Games weren't destined to be the next giant of media, capturing billions every single year. They were just simply a shot in the dark. I hope that someone, somewhere, would care about batting a few pixels around the screen. So a lot of these early games are just simple, meaningless demos, if you will, of all the experiences that you would have and that would be birthed from these roots. That doesn't particularly mean that some of these games aren't a bit weird or creepy, because some of them are. They're strange, And the sound design sounds more like an alien rambling through a transmission, more than music half of the time. But it was all experimental. We could equally look back at some of the early clothing or TV shows and equally feel the same way. Go back and watch a news report from the early days of TV, and I bet you'll get that same fuzzy feeling that you would when you're playing an older game. It's not so much it's what you're seeing isn't scary, it's that it's unfamiliar to you now. You can't imagine a world where that is the normal, because you've never lived in a world where that is the normal. So we'll have to speculate by creating creepy online stories of the snippets of some of the earliest versions of things that we now hold so near and dear to our heart, and that's video games. We could equally sit now and speculate that the things we do now, the things we watch, the things we play, every single thing we do, at some point in the future, we'll look back on as if it was worse than. Technology will always progress, and the technology we use now will eventually become the old technology. So looking at old games now will be like our stuff getting looked at then. So will they look back at our things and think, oh, that's weird, that's a bit abnormal, that's a bit odd? Probably not, because there is a big technological progression. When you look at the likes of Pong to now, there is a huge change in how games develop, how games play, what you see, what you do, and just how much you have to be engaged to play the game. Games have come a ridiculously long way from then. So if we were to go any further than now, we would literally have to be playing the game. We'd have to be in the game. The game would have to become us. And I know we're kind of getting there with VR and things like that, but we're not quite there yet. So games now are sort of the best of what we're going to get in this current moment. Until we make some sort of massive scientific breakthrough, we're going to have to enjoy what we've got. Because any further than that becomes altered reality. It becomes virtual reality. It becomes that we are literally making lives for us to live. Which is sort of a strange concept that we could go too far. We could potentially push ourselves that little bit too into that realm, and it becomes its own brand of horror then. Because imagine a world where we literally aren't alive, we're just living inside the simulations. I know there's plenty of conspiracy theories that is the case now, but if games are to progress any further, that's sort of the way they're going to head. That you just plug yourself in, lean back, and you're in the game forever. The game becomes your life. And that is a terrifying thought that, personally, I don't want to be involved in, because I get really existential when I think about stuff like that, and that's not what I want to do right now. So I'm happy to swing the opposite way and look back on games, look back on the simplicity of the early games, because that's the kind of horror we're talking about here. How an early game could potentially just seem scary because it's old. And I think this is a good place to get towards the end of my point. I don't think games are scary because they're old. I think they're just dated. I think we've moved so much past that going back and looking at it seems a little bit jarring, a little bit out of this world, because they are so simple. There is no sound. It's just sort of like emptiness. But that to them was a lot. We were looking at the glass half empty. They were looking at it half full. And that was just how it was with games. They never had experiences with things like that. Home entertainment was a very rich premium to have. You need a lot of money and a lot of time in order to get yourself a game console that could play Pong or something like that. So I guess there is no fear in older games. It's just an unsettling unawareness of what you're playing and the era it came from. So try and enjoy these older games. Try and always think about that when you're playing them, that someone somewhere was playing this once upon a time and thought, wow, this looks great. I remember my very first time playing Gears of War 1, and at the time I thought graphics ain't going to get much better than this. I look back at it now and they look like they're made of clay. So things always progress, things get better, and I'm sure games will, just like everything else. So I hope you enjoyed the video. My name, of course, has been Gillo Boy Jr. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and comment down below. Tell me what you think. Do you think games are going to go too far? Do you think games are right where they need to be? Or do you think there is a bit more push, that we can try more things and experiment with games? If you want to see anything about a certain character, certain thing, a creepy aspect in a game, anything, cut content, you just let me know down below. Thank you so much for choosing my video. Thanks so much for watching. I again have been Gillo Boy Jr. and I will catch you later.